In the last decade or so, several people have told me I have this calm, peaceful presence. And on YouTube, people have left similar comments. Someone even said they want me to narrate their day. And apparently I also look and sound like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. Not sure what to make of that, but I'm glad I don't remind people of King Joffrey or Ramsay Bolton. But I guess to a certain extent it's true. I'm a calm person. I rarely pick fights or go off on an emotional rant, and I stay clear from people who do. I'm drawn to people who have their act together. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean quiet introverts. I have some very extrovert friends, but they're grounded, balanced. At least that's how they come across to me. But I don't always feel calm and composed on the inside, no matter my outward appearance. There's a reason I'm interested in concepts like slow living and minimalism. They offer a promise of a peaceful and calm life, of being balanced. I'm still very much on a journey of discovery, and I feel I'm not even halfway there. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said of the human condition, "On the surface of the ocean there is stillness, but underneath there are currents." I recognize myself in that. I'm driven, I have so many things that I'd like to do or experience, and sometimes that goes at the expense of my well-being. And I can't beat myself up about procrastinating, while I then continue to procrastinate. I don't know, maybe you can relate to that. I struggle to find a sweet spot between being productive and living more slowly, and I sometimes mess up. Like, I don't have it all figured out, and I hope I don't come across as such in these videos, but I'm getting better at it. One thing I've taken more seriously over time is listening to the signals of my body. When I feel tense, anxious, I know I need to take a step back, slow down and regain my balance. And I have certain routines in place that prevent me from going into the red too often. So here are 3 habits that calm me. I go for a walk every single day. If I work from home that day, I go for a walk immediately after I wake up as part of my morning routine, before I even had a coffee. I used to have a coffee like 5 minutes after waking up, but I've since learned that that interferes with the body's production of cortisol. If you drink a coffee immediately after waking up, the body produces less of it and it relies more on the caffeine. I find that going for a walk wakes me up. It gets the blood flowing, the outside air is refreshing, and it clears my head. When I work in a co-working space, I save that morning walk for my commute. I wasn't always into walking though. 10 years ago, I had really bad headaches which prevented me from working for a while. I felt lost and hit the gym hard, 6 times a week. But I also decided to get therapy, and my psychologist said, "You're doing the same thing in the gym that you were doing at work. Full speed ahead. You need to slow down. Stop going to the gym and instead walk 2 hours a day in nature." So I did that. One day, this beautiful dog came up to me and it stopped right in front of me, lay on its back and wanted me to pet its belly. So I did, wondering whose dog this was. It was this brief moment of joy, and soon the dog's owner came around the corner, we had a bit of small talk and we went on our way. But it planted the seed. What if I could volunteer as a dog walker at the local shelter? Long story short, I ended up volunteering as a dog walker for more than a year. I'd walk 4 dogs every weekend and it was great. I love being outside, the exercise, it really calmed me down. And what I also enjoyed was being able to help these dogs because they weren't walked enough. I remember the very first dog I had to walk. I showed up in the winter, it was 8 AM, it had snowed, and the dog they picked for me was a Chihuahua. I had to walk with another volunteer that had to train me before I was allowed to walk these dogs on my own. But I was like, come on man, you're having me walk a Chihuahua? But they said, yeah, you gotta start at the bottom and work your way up to the bigger dogs. So, we're walking outside, this tiny dog on a leash, and I was so glad everyone was still asleep. I was embarrassed. But then we crossed the road, and because it had snowed, they had put the salt on the road to melt the ice, and it hurt the paws of the Chihuahua. So I had to pick it up, and as I had it in my arm, I was thinking like, you know what? You're a dog like any of the big dogs out there, and you can't help it that the likes of Paris Hilton put you in a purse and show you off. Like, that's not your choice. You're very much a dog too. And then, I just owned it and I felt proud walking that dog, and I worked my way up since then. I walked dogs there for a whole year. And I've continued going for walks long after my headaches had passed. Whether it's in nature or when I'm intentionally getting lost in a city and letting myself be surprised by whatever awaits me around the corner. I also go for a walk when I want to think things over. Carl Newport calls this productive meditation. And the idea is that you take a single well-defined professional problem and think it over during a walk. Now, I find this particularly helpful when I'm sitting behind a desk and I'm just stuck. I have no inspiration. So I don't know what it is, the change of scenery combined with the exercise, but it can spark new ideas. And I make sure I don't bring my phone, I just bring a pen and a piece of paper to jot down any insights that may come up during that walk. And as a side note, if you're going to do this, according to a 2008 study done by researchers at the University of Michigan, it matters where you take that walk while wanting to tackle a challenging problem. Those who walked in nature performed 20% better on a test problem than those in the city. And that result was the same when they let the group switch locations a week later. Most of the time though, when I go for a walk, it's simply to unwind, be outside and get some fresh air. I prefer walking in nature, although that's not always possible. I don't listen to any music and I don't do calls. Also, most of the time I go alone, especially if my goal is to regain my calm and balance. There's just something about the slow pace of a walk that calms down my racing mind. In 2016, a colleague of mine recommended the podcast This American Life to me. Specifically the episode where Lulu Wang tells a crazy story where she went back to China for a staged wedding. Her 8-year-old grandma had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and was given only 3 months to live. Except nobody told her. The family was afraid she wouldn't be able to handle the blow. So what they did instead was organize this giant goodbye party under the disguise of a wedding. If this sounds familiar, the 2019 movie The Farewell is based on this story. This wasn't the first podcast I ever listened to, but it was the first time I was hooked. I'd never heard anything like it. So I've been a fan of these types of shows from that moment on, especially ones that focus on human stories. So beside This American Life, some of my favorites are Ear Hustle, 99% Invisible, and I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I also love true crime shows. Some really good ones are Serial, West Cork, and In the Dark. When I'm working, I tend to have this business mindset where I'm focused on a single problem or task. That's a great mode to be in when I want to get things done, but it doesn't calm me down. Podcasts do. There's nothing else like it. There's just something very intimate about having someone's voice in your ear. It's like they're right there with you. I have trouble falling asleep. It takes me quite some time. So a practice that I've started to develop is that I listen to a podcast in bed. And that allows me to already close my eyes and unwind a little bit, but I'm still not fully asleep. I listen to this podcast until I'm noticing I'm like drifting off, and then I just turn it off, put my headphones away, and often I fall asleep within 5 to 10 minutes. What's great about listening to a podcast is that it takes me out of my head. It stops my racing mind and projects me into this other world. Another thing I love about listening to podcasts is that there's room for nuance. When watching the news, checking tweets or social media, there's very little nuance in my experience. It's about capturing someone's attention, especially online, and then condensing the information in the smallest tidbits as possible. Now, while there's something to say for that, it does come at a price. It's human nature to want to label things. This is good, that is bad, so we can close that loop and move on to the next thing. But often things aren't that simple. Life isn't just black or white, there are a lot of gray tones. And I found that the slow pace and the long duration of the average podcast episode are perfect for that. Okay, so this one probably doesn't come as a surprise. I've talked about reading on this channel before. I had a phase where I mostly read self-help books, and although I got a lot of value out of them, those aren't my go-to when I'm looking to slow down. Similar to how I don't listen to a business podcast when I want to unwind, I don't pick up a personal development book. Instead, I read fiction or a non-fiction book on a topic that I'm interested in that's not business. There's this quote by Honoré de Balzac that I love. Reading brings us unknown friends. It's so true, especially with fiction. Growing up, I read books like Scout the Dog and Crusade in Jeans. The main characters of those books are teenagers, like myself at the time. And immersing myself in their world made it as if I was there with them. Now, as an adult, I've had similar experiences with novels like Donna Tartt's The Secret History or Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But I don't read fiction exclusively when I want to feel calm. I also enjoy reading non-fiction that inspires me to think about life. Books about spirituality, like The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I read that book at least 3 times. And right now I'm reading 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. And the premise of this book is that we have 4,000 weeks, which equals about 80 years on this planet, and it's just not enough for all the things we want to do. And we can't control the time we do have. Only if we can embrace our finitude and come to terms with it, can we start to live a fulfilling life. Now this really hit home with me this year because I have had to juggle a lot of balls in the air and it was exhausting. And reading this book made me reflect on some of the choices I made on how I spent my time. And I want to make different choices going forward. Speaking of which, I need to make time to read. There was a phase in my life where I hardly read anything. When I was busy or tired, the first thing that went out the window was reading. But I miss those unknown friends. Or as author George R.R. Martin famously said, "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one." So now I schedule it. Reading is part of my morning routine. I don't check the news or emails, and instead the first words that hit my mind in the morning are those from the book that I'm reading. This, combined with my morning walk, prepares me for the day ahead. And I'm also not super strict with it. If I'm late or I have a deadline, I have no problem skipping it. I want reading to be fun and relaxing. I don't want it to feel like a chore, something that I have to check off on my to-do list every day. I don't just read in the morning. Including it in my morning routine is just a way of making reading a habit. But when I feel like it, I also will read at night. I did a separate video on my evening routine, which you can watch right here, and in it I share some reflections on why I enjoy reading fiction, as well as on the book that I was reading at the time, Clara and the Sun. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!